What would happen if you turned on your tap tomorrow and nothing came out? No warning, no announcement, just silence. That moment, the one you've never imagined, has already happened to millions of people throughout history. It didn't arrive with sirens, it didn't come with headlines, it came quietly. And by the time they understood what was happening, it was already too late. Because systems don't collapse all at once, they fail slowly, then suddenly. For decades, the United States has operated on a single assumption: water is always available. Built into the infrastructure, part of the invisible network that runs beneath every morning shower, every glass filled at the sink, every city that forgets to ask where its water actually comes from. But beneath that stability, something has been shifting. Major reservoirs declining, rivers running below historical levels, underground aquifers draining faster than rain can ever replenish them. And yet the tap still runs. For now. The most dangerous phase of any collapse isn't when it becomes visible. It's the phase before that, when nothing looks different, when life feels normal, when the system is already failing in ways the eye cannot detect. That invisibility is not a comfort, it's a warning. History has already shown what follows. Communities don't adapt, they react. Supply chains strain, access becomes rationed, and the people hit hardest aren't always the least prepared. They're the most dependent. The ones who trusted a single source, a single system, a single assumption that it would always be there. When that assumption breaks, there is no transition, only consequences. The question isn't whether this can happen. The question is whether you will understand your position inside that system before it does. There is a particular kind of danger that hides inside comfort. Not the danger you can see coming, not the storm on the horizon or the warning on the radio. The danger that lives inside the ordinary, inside the routine, inside the assumption that because something has always worked, it always will. That is exactly where America finds itself today. For generations, this country built something remarkable, a water infrastructure so vast, so deeply embedded into daily life that most people have never once stopped to think about it. Reservoirs carved into mountains, aqueducts stretching hundreds of miles, underground pipelines threading beneath every city, every suburb, every quiet rural road. A system so effective, it made water invisible. And invisibility, when it comes to survival, is not a sign of abundance, it's a sign of dependency. Because when you stop seeing something, you stop questioning it, you stop measuring it, you stop asking whether it will still be there next year, next decade, next generation. And that is precisely when the slow erosion begins. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the United States, has dropped to levels not seen since the day it was first filled nearly a century ago. The Colorado River, the artery that feeds water to over 40 million people across 7 states, is being consumed faster than nature can restore it, year after year, season after season. This is not a prediction, this is already documented, already measured, already confirmed by the very agencies built to monitor it. And it doesn't stop there. The Ogallala Aquifer, the vast underground reserve that runs beneath the Great Plains and supplies water to one of the most agriculturally productive regions on Earth, is disappearing, silently, invisibly, drained by decades of irrigation, by the demands of a growing population, by a system that was never designed to give back what it takes. Hydrologists who have spent careers studying this formation have said it plainly: once it's gone, it does not come back. Not in a human lifetime, not in several. You don't refill the Ogallala. you simply run dry. Water was never infinite. It was borrowed, and the debt is coming due. There is something the human brain is not wired to detect. Not sudden danger, we feel that instantly. The startle, the spike of adrenaline, the body moving before the mind has even formed a thought. What the brain cannot process is gradual loss, the slow removal of something so familiar it has become background noise, so embedded in daily life that its absence doesn't register until the absence becomes total. Psychologists call it the boiling frog effect. Biologists call it baseline shift. Historians call it the pattern that precedes every civilization that ever ran out of something it believed was permanent. We call it Tuesday, because that's what it looks like from the inside. Normal, unremarkable, another day in which everything seems to be functioning exactly as it should. And that is the most dangerous condition a society can inhabit. Not crisis, not collapse, the comfortable space just before both. Right now, across the American West, the soil is losing its capacity to retain moisture at a rate that has no modern precedent. The technical term is vapor pressure deficit, the atmospheric demand for water that pulls moisture out of the ground, out of plants, out of reservoirs, and into an increasingly dry sky that gives almost nothing back. When this deficit rises, water evaporates faster than it can be replaced. Crops fail, soil cracks, rivers shrink, and underground reserves, already strained, begin to drop without a single visible sign on the surface. The grass still grows, for a while. The faucet still runs, for a while. Life continues, familiar, comfortable, unaware. And then one season, one dry summer, 1 year without adequate snowpack in the mountains that feed the rivers, that feed the reservoirs, that feed the pipelines, that feed 40 million people. The margin disappears. And there is no warning label on the moment it happens. Consider what took place in Cape Town, South Africa, in 2018, one of the most developed, most modern cities on the African continent. A city with infrastructure, with systems, with engineers and planners and municipal water authorities. They called it Day Zero, the day the taps would go dry. Not hypothetically, not eventually, a specific date publicly announced when the city's reservoirs would drop below the minimum threshold required to maintain supply. When 4 million people would have to line up at government-controlled collection points to receive a daily ration of 25 liters. 25 liters per person per day. For context, the average American uses approximately 300 liters per day. Cape Town had months of warning, and still the social fabric began to unravel almost immediately. Lines formed. Tensions rose. Water became a currency, a source of conflict, a measure of power. And Cape Town was not experiencing a megadrought. It was experiencing a severe drought in one city on one continent. Now extend that scenario across an entire region, across multiple states, across a nation of 330 million people who have never once been asked to consider what happens when the infrastructure that delivers their water silently fails. The human brain responds to scarcity in predictable ways. Cortisol rises, threat response activates, rational decision-making narrows, and the behavior that emerges, hoarding, competition over basic resources, is not a reflection of character. It is biology. It is what happens when a need this fundamental goes unmet. And here is the part that most people are not prepared to hear. The communities most devastated in a water crisis are not the ones with the least resources. They are the ones with the most dependency. The ones who outsourced every link in the chain, who never asked where the water came from, who built a life on the assumption that someone else had already solved the problem. When that assumption collapses, there is no skill to fall back on, no alternative, no second source. Only the sudden, disorienting weight of realizing that something you took for granted your entire life was never guaranteed. The shift has already begun. Most people just haven't felt it yet, but some have. And what they discovered in the silence of a dry well, in the stillness of an empty barrel, in the dead of night when they realized what they were truly facing, changed everything about how they live. One of those people built something that may be the most quietly important invention most Americans have never heard of. And what he built didn't come from a laboratory, a government grant, or a Silicon Valley startup. It came from desperation, from faith, and from a desert. History doesn't warn you. It simply repeats. And the people living inside the repetition almost never recognize it until they are standing in the middle of consequences they believed would never reach them. The 1930s, the American Great Plains, a region that had been farmed aggressively for decades, topsoil stripped, prairie grass removed, land worked past its natural capacity by a generation that believed productivity was permanent. Then the rain stopped. Not for a week, not for a season, for years. What followed was not just a drought, it was a dismantling. Entire communities erased by walls of dust that turned day into darkness. Crops gone, livestock dead, wells dry. Families who had built entire lives on that land forced to walk away from everything they owned and drive west toward a promise that wasn't waiting for them. The Dust Bowl displaced over 3 million people. 3 million. And the most haunting part of that chapter in American history is not the scale of the suffering. It is the testimony of the people who lived through it. Men and women who, in the months before it all collapsed, described their lives as normal. Difficult in small ways, perhaps, but normal. The shift, when it came fast. That pattern, stability, slow erosion, sudden collapse, is not unique to the 1930s. It is the pattern. It appears in the fall of the Roman water system, which at its peak delivered 1 billion liters of fresh water daily to the city, and which crumbled not in a single catastrophic event, but through decades of deferred maintenance, political fragmentation, and population stress, until one day the aqueducts simply stopped flowing. It appears again in the collapse of the ancient Akkadian Empire, which modern archaeologists now attribute in significant part to a prolonged drought that disrupted agriculture, fractured supply chains, and triggered waves of migration and conflict that the empire's infrastructure could not absorb. It appears again and again, across cultures, across centuries, across civilizations that believed their systems were permanent. None of them were. And in every case, the populations most devastated shared one defining characteristic. They waited. They waited for official confirmation. They waited for the government to act. They waited for the crisis to become undeniable before they began to ask what they would do when the water stopped. By then, the asking was already too late. Because a water crisis does not give you a transition period. It gives you a threshold. And on one side of that threshold, life continues, uncomfortable perhaps, restricted, but manageable. On the other side of that threshold, the side reached not gradually but in a single tipping moment, the rules change entirely. Prices for bottled water multiply overnight, store shelves empty within hours. Civil behavior, the kind that holds communities together under normal pressure, begins to strain under the weight of a need this primal. Water is not like other shortages. You can survive weeks without food. You cannot survive days without water. That biological reality, that hard cellular fact, is what transforms a water disruption into something categorically different from any other infrastructure failure. And it is what transforms the people who understood this in advance into something their communities desperately need. Not preppers, not extremists, not people living in fear, providers. People who looked at the data, felt the weight of what it meant, and quietly made a decision to ensure that those they love would never face that threshold unprepared. That decision looks different for different people, but for one man in Arizona, a man who had already stood on the wrong side of that threshold, who had already felt what it means to have something taken that you believed was yours, that decision led him somewhere unexpected. To a technology developed in one of the driest places on Earth, to a solution so simple it almost defies belief, and to a question that, once you hear the answer, you will not be able to stop thinking about. Where does water actually come from when the ground has nothing left to give? Most people, when they lose something essential, ask one question: how do I get it back? They look backward, toward what existed before, toward the well that ran dry, the system that failed, the source that disappeared. They measure the loss against the memory of abundance and try to rebuild what was there. That instinct is human. It is natural. It is also, in the wrong circumstances, fatal. Because when the source itself is gone, when the aquifer drops below recovery, when the reservoir crosses the threshold, when the well pulls nothing but dust and silence, looking backward doesn't give you water. It gives you grief. You can survive weeks without food. You cannot survive days without water. That biological reality, that hard cellular fact, is what transforms a water disruption into something categorically different from any other infrastructure failure. And it is what transforms the people who understood this in advance into something their communities desperately need. Not preppers, not extremists, not people living in fear, providers. People who looked at the data, felt the weight of what it meant, and quietly made a decision to ensure that those they love would never face that threshold unprepared. That decision looks different for different people. But for one man in Arizona, a man who had already stood on the wrong side of that threshold, who had already felt what it means to have something taken that you believed was yours, that decision led him somewhere unexpected, to a technology developed in one of the driest places on Earth, to a solution so simple it almost defies belief, and to a question that once you hear the answer, you will not be able to stop thinking about. Where does water actually come from when the ground has nothing left to give? Most people, when they lose something essential, ask one question: how do I get it back? They look backward, toward what existed before, toward the well that ran dry, the system that failed, the source that disappeared. They measure the loss against the memory of abundance and try to rebuild what was there. That instinct is human. It is natural. It is also, in the wrong circumstances, fatal. Because when the source itself is gone, when the aquifer drops below recovery, when the reservoir crosses the threshold, when the well pulls nothing but dust and silence, looking backward doesn't give you water. It gives you grief.
John Gilmore understood this the night he stood in his shed in Arizona, looking at the empty space where his water barrels used to be. Head bandaged, family shaken, 5 months on a waiting list for a well that might not solve the problem even when it was finally drilled. He didn't ask how to get back what he had lost. He asked something different. He asked where water actually exists when the ground has nothing left to give. And that question, that single shift in direction, led him somewhere most people never think to look: up. Not metaphorically, literally. The atmosphere above every inch of this planet holds water, suspended, invisible, present even in conditions that feel impossibly dry. The air above the Sonoran Desert, one of the most arid landscapes in North America, contains measurable, extractable moisture at almost every hour of the day. Scientists have known this for decades. The question was never whether the moisture existed. The question was whether it could be captured efficiently, affordably, by an ordinary person without an engineering degree or a government contract. And here is where the story takes a turn that most people are not expecting. Because this question, how to pull water from air in conditions of extreme heat and low humidity, was not being researched in American universities or Silicon Valley labs. It was being solved in the field, in the desert, by one of the most battle-tested military forces on Earth. The Israeli Defense Forces operate in terrain that makes the Arizona landscape look forgiving. Temperatures that exceed human tolerance, supply lines that cannot be guaranteed, soldiers who need water, not eventually, not when resupply arrives, but now, continuously, without dependency on any external system. The technology they developed to solve that problem is not classified. It is not inaccessible, but it has been buried beneath a price point designed to keep it out of the hands of ordinary families, until someone decided to change that. What John Gilmore reverse-engineered in his garage, working from schematics, from salvaged parts, from the kind of focused desperation that sharpens a man's thinking in ways comfort never could, was not a gadget. It was not a gimmick. It was a functional, buildable, independently powered system that pulls clean drinking water directly from the air, day after day, quietly, without a pipe, a well, or a single point of dependency on a failing infrastructure. And the cost to build it yourself? Under $150. But before you understand what this system does, you need to understand what John went through to find it. Because the night that changed everything for his family didn't begin with a drought. It began at 2:14 in the morning.